Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Retail Corner Podcast. We are blessed today to be joined by Stephen Kaufman. Stephen Kaufman is an expert when it comes to AI and data security and moving things around so that people can buy them, which is why we're here. And so, Stephen, thank you for joining us, man.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, I know we've talked a little bit, but just so people kind of know who you are, and can you kind of walk us through your CV a little bit? Why you came to the corner today?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I've been working with retail initially, even 20, 25 years ago, mostly in the context of brick and mortar retail. I was in the packaging field. I've also done a lot with retail marketing. I worked initially for a company called Shock that had Shock Retail Marketing Division, headquartered here in Chicago. Was their chief technology officer. Gradually did a startup with asset management, workflow, and content. And content is always near and dear to us, and we'll be talking about content with generative AI today. But I worked in that field for a while and transitioned from chief technology to chief product officer. So as chief product officer for a startup called Blue Software, and then more recently was with a company called Esko, headquartered out of Belgium, that did DAM, workflow, and content. And most recently today, I work for a company called Inriver that deals with product information management in a space called the PIM space, where we deal a lot with both online retail, product messaging, and brick and mortar context.
Well, that little space right there, what you're calling the PIM, it's becoming more and more important because I know I'll even be standing in brick and mortar with my phone looking at something as a description.
Yeah,
looking
absolutely.
at something, and so having that piece in place is pretty important. For people in the store, people out of the store, people across the world.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. If I was in a Best Buy about 10 years ago, you were kind of discouraged or frowned upon from looking at your phone, because they knew you were comparing prices. Now it's like, oh, please read it, because we don't know as much walk around the floor as our website does on our phone. So I think we've come to do it and accept it, and the brick and mortar retailers also, if they don't encourage it, they certainly understand it.
Right. Just because it's so common practice.
Yeah.
And so, like we were talking about, this is 2024. We have to talk about AI. We have to talk about the wind that is in everybody's sail right now. And so, usually when people talk about AI, it's all theoretical. It's all, yes, we should be doing this. We should be doing that. You guys are actually applying it, like applying AI. Can you kind of give me the nuts and bolts example of that, like generative AI? How does that enhance?
Yeah. Let me kind of go to a kind of a heart and center of a use case that might help everybody understand how it's being used today. And then we might go into a couple more slightly technical aspects, but I kind of want to keep it manageable and digestible. So one of the probably core use cases for AI is building compelling product descriptions for an e-commerce context. And a lot of companies have the time to write a single product description for a hero product that they're releasing. There's a lot of marketing time and money against it. But as you proliferate products and you get into different retail buying contexts like convenience or big box, you get more and more descriptions, and then you get different buying contexts. Is the person looking on their phone? Are they on a laptop? Are they in the stores? You just mentioned looking. So we're using AI at Inriver to build product descriptions, but rather than just reaching out and tying to a large language model and kind of hoping for the best, we tie a lot of
which can be dangerous. Yeah,
it can be dangerous, and everybody's kind of heard the term hallucination, and that sometimes AI can kind of come up with its own ideas about things. So how you ground AI large language models is you provide it with lots of data. And since we have data like height, width, weight, imagery, and AI can learn, I should mention, from the imagery of the product, just like it can from text. That kind of grounds the large language model in some hard-coded data, hardcore data. And then as it generates the product descriptions, you can modify things like the length of the description, the creativity, the tone, and you can inform it as to who the buying segment might be. What might the buying context be? And so that allows us to create 30, 40, 50 descriptions on a product that can be distributed into different buying contexts. And I'm just talking English. That doesn't even accommodate for the fact that I might be marking the product in French or in Dutch or in German and they would have their own context. So I think the core use case, probably the most compelling one, has been for product description creation. And I'd also maybe weight it one other way. Instead of that hero product, think of a company that has a long tail assortment of products, some that were released a few years ago and they don't get the love that they got when they were first introduced, but they still need refreshing. So I have one client that has a really long tail assortment and they got a 60% lift in their engagement with their long tail. And they didn't even use it for the new stuff. The new stuff had marketing people all over it, but they really use it to boost long tail.
That's kind of cool because so what you're saying is myself and my buddy go shopping. We could pull up this same item and have slightly different descriptions that are more applicable to me.
Yes.
Because I mean, like my buddy, he's a bodybuilder. I'm obviously not.
Yes.
And so
well, I didn't mean to agree so quickly, but
yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for that. Yeah, but that's kind of cool. That's because so how you mentioned you have to feed it the right data. Where?
Sorry, repeat that last part right there.
You mentioned you kind of have to feed the large language model the right data.
Yes.
Where are you finding those data pieces?
Yeah, so this comes back to kind of the place of the PIM and how I think the PIM has been evolving over time. So at one point, a lot of the data would either be in ERP tools, enterprise resource planning tools like Oracle, SAP, or other. And all you're really doing is mapping the fields into the PIM, but you really weren't probably transforming the data so much. Now we're seeing a lot more sophisticated manipulation of the ERP data so that it might be concatenated, split out, put together, rejoined. So there's some edification of the ERP data. And then data is also coming from systems called PLM systems, product lifecycle management systems that might have information on the R&D of the product, how it came to be, what market research was done to bring the product to market. And then other systems like content systems, Adobe Experience Manager, or other content systems like Contentful, where they've written marketing copy maybe to a brand or a genre, but not to a product. And so as I'm writing a product description, you want to be informed about the tone of the brand and what's the personality of the brand as you write the description. Otherwise, the description can kind of sound out of touch with the marketing elements of the brand itself.
That makes sense. So you're collecting all this information from, half a dozen different sources, and those sources are probably growing by the daily, and just given the amount of information that's out there. I've spent way too many years as an asset protection guy, and so how do you secure that data? Like, because nobody wants that out there just floating in the universe any more than it already is.
Yeah. So I guess there's two elements to that. So one area that I think clients are often concerned with from a security perspective is, am I teaching a large language model how to educate my competitors, either how to sell against me, or I'm just teaching them how to sell their products better when I put the money and the work in. So am I training some cloud model robot how to be better, right? So that's really a valid question. That's probably the more valid of the two. I'll get to the second one in a moment. So we use OpenAI, which is a standard large language model, but we use it in the context of Microsoft Azure, and it's a stateless model, meaning we put the data in, it runs the algorithm, gives the answer, but does not retain the data of our product's customers, the descriptions, or even the output, because it's stateless. So the large language model has a certain amount of data. It gets asked a question. It uses as parameters of the question the data that I just mentioned, all that ancillary data, gives the answer, but it doesn't retain or store the learnings that went through to generate the data. Now, if I just logged into ChatGPT and I was to ask the same things, you wouldn't be getting those same protections, because the ChatGPT model is to learn from end users, from use cases. So the way we're deploying it is really critical to make that to distinguish those two. The other area you mentioned, part of your question wasn't just the data itself, but where's that data going? Well, often what we're generating is going to Amazon or Target. It is going into the public internet. So maybe a little bit less concern there, but still data could be scraped. It is held private in our site, but I would mention that there are many products that go scrape public websites and try to gather insights about whatever data descriptions are publicly available. So I think the audience should be aware that their descriptions, as long as they're on the web without some type of gate, they are being gathered and analyzed by a number of tools in the space.
Yeah, just all over, really.
Yeah, there's scraping going on all the time. Spidering, scraping, bots, whatever we want to call it.
All the stuff that you don't want to think about. Oof.
Yes. Yes.
But okay, so if I'm sitting there as a retailer, I've got a team of people that are sitting there, and it is their job to write descriptions and make sure that everything is up to date and accurate and everything else like that. And I'm wanting to kind of integrate this a little bit into my world.
Yes.
How do I stick my big toe into that pool? Is it better to leap in? Is it better to how would one take advantage of this?
Yeah. So I think the first thing, there's so many different kinds of products and ways that somebody writing descriptions could be looking to use AI. Typically, we're not writing a base initial product description. Like I said, we're making variations or using AI to enhance the productivity of an individual. So we do strongly believe in what we call human in the loop AI workflows. So that typically begins with somebody writing, let's say, a base description for a base market, and then using that to create some of these other iterations. We really believe the proliferation of product descriptions into the different contexts and markets that I mentioned is growing much faster than the capability of AI to just generate a single description. So we think human in the loop is appropriate. And as you mentioned, and I mentioned the word hallucination earlier, there is a checking cycle that does need to go on. So if I spend my time with, I would call it value added time using AI to build my productivity, but then checking what AI does, at the end of the day, my time as a human should be more valuable and I should be more productive. So I really should be looking for higher quality and more productivity with the same amount of hours put into the task. And so having said the broad context, now I would take it to an individual. Okay, let's talk about your product. Is it a brand new product? Is it a refresh? Is it something that's long tail? What are you looking to accomplish? And where's your pain point? Because you don't want to just create a pain point because AI can fix it. You want to come to the table with a real pain point and then figure out, was there a way that these AI tools can help me with my pain point? I would start it from a problem perspective rather than the answer perspective.
So I love that we're kind of educationally focused here on the retail.
Yeah.
So when you talk about pain points, let's drag some of those into the light. What are some challenges that you're seeing with application of all this?
Yeah. So I would say that one might be that a writer comes in, they get a marketing brief, they're going to do a product description, right? But they're not actually given all the different buying contexts. They might be told, hey, we're doing a launch next month at Target. Their brain is thinking brick and mortar. Maybe there's an ad campaign to go with it. And so they're really focused on that launch. But then they do the launch, and then 3 months later says, hey, remember that launch you did 3 months ago? Now we need 8 more descriptions across convenience, grocery, and we're doing a different campaign. And now this is just an add-on product. It's not the hero product. Well, now that's a really different context for writer to swap into.
That is pretty interesting. But like just some specific pain points. What are we talking about?
So it could be language. It could be that I'm a writer. My personal demographic is I'm 55-year-old male living in a suburb, but I'm being asked to write something for a 14 to 18 demographic on the West Coast of the U.S. And so there's a feel, a language, a tone. I would at least like AI to give me a first shot at that. Give me some words, give me some lingo, give me a feeling, start my creative juices flowing, and then maybe I can take it from there. So it also could be writing in a language that I don't speak. That's pretty challenging to write a French product.
It's pretty difficult, yeah.
I speak English, right? So you can use large language models in 2 different ways. One is you could write a description in English and then have it just do a straight translation. But that's been going on for 15 to 20 years. And there's been machine learning and AI long before ChatGPT in that space. But what's a little newer is using the large language model in the native language to come up with the tonality and the creativity. What that means is you're not taking English and translating it to German. You're actually looking at German product descriptions and German websites and all the German data in the large language model. And you get really much better results that to an end user, to a buyer, feel more interesting, feel more natural than a straight translation. There's something subtle and really important about that conversation.
Okay. So like how adaptive is it, or how reactive, I guess is the right term. How reactive if
well,
if the Rangers win the World Series, does that automatically go in and change the descriptions? Is it reacting to that kind of feed?
Well, you might remember that the original ChatGPT was frozen in 2021, and then it was updated a little bit. So you didn't have those event-driven contexts that you could push against. And so if you think of markets like sports drinks, what you just mentioned is critically important, some of those contexts. Sure. But as you get into ChatGPT 4, the ChatGPT 4 Plus, and other LLMs, they're becoming more segregated and specialized. So another thing that we allowed Inriver and I'm presuming others would also is bring your own LLM. So if you don't like OpenAI and you don't like the way it's hosted on Microsoft Azure, large companies are building their own LLMs and adding their own context so they can just upload the New York Times every day to their own LLM or any other sports magazine or sports page. And it's called a RAG. It's a sort of a secondary LLM to feed and enhance the initial LLM with contextual data. So this is a really rapidly moving area. You and I mentioned before the call how rapidly this is evolving, and a RAG is something to Google and look at what does a RAG mean in AI and how could marketers use a RAG.
That's okay, because I mean, with as much information as out there, you've got to be able to integrate the new stuff.
That's right. Because at the end of the day, if we're not writing compelling product descriptions, I mean, there's work involved in this, right? You got to learn this thing, and you got to talk to your legal and work through it and be able to rationalize it to your coworkers and to your customers and who own the brand, or maybe it's an internal group that owns the brand. And so why go through all that if at the end of the day, the product descriptions are either not compliant or they're just not that compelling? You kind of stick your toe in the water and look at it and go, yeah, maybe in a year or two. But we're finding that in some markets and segments, this is right now, this is happening, this is compelling. We're getting, enhanced SEO, better tagging, and better sales response, which is why we're doing it the first.
What's your favorite market right now? What's your favorite niche to be in right now? Where are you getting the best bang for your buck?
I think it's probably electronics, if I was just to name one segment, because if I'm looking at something like a household good, toilet paper, or maybe adhesives or something, there's only so much you can say. You can say some stuff. I don't know, put it down, but there's only so much. But if you're buying an iPhone versus a Galaxy, you're going to spend $800. I'm telling you what, I'm going to read an awful lot before making expensive electronics purchase. I'm worried about the specs. I want them to be accurate, but compelling marketing copy, below the fold content, A+ is a differentiator, right? And so there's just so much to be done in cosmetics, jewelry, and electronics right now. I think that's really where we're seeing a lot of activity. And again, I've got a client that sells concrete forms that loves it. So I don't want to say that it's not for everybody, but I think there's so much to be done when you have long, detailed product descriptions and lots of specs, which, what's got more specs than a phone?
Right. But I mean, as we were talking earlier, this is, especially this type of AI, it's going to touch everything. It's a matter of how quickly that that market responds. How quickly, because if you're in a market that is not responding right now, and you start applying this, I can guarantee you your competitors will be there pretty quickly. And so it's a matter of just making sure that you're kind of ahead of the curve a little bit on it, because
I guess another way I like to think of it is you do, and not to mute your point, you do have to stay ahead of competition, because we know competitors are using these tools. We know they're available. But one thing to do is maybe we step back and look at the arc of personalization and realize we're not at a fully personalized marketing moment. And that's not to say, as you mentioned earlier to me, that you might be standing by a buddy, look up a product and have a different description. I'm not saying there's no personalization, but if we go back to, a global television advertising in the 60s, one message for everybody. And we kind of said, and the end would be a different message for me at 9 a.m. than 10 a.m. because I might be in a different mood or be done with breakfast. We're still in the middle somewhere. We haven't reached full personalization. We're probing how and when and where to do that and how to do it economically. But I think it's good to remember we're not there yet, but these tools will help you walk along the path of full personalization.
That's kind of cool. I mean, I'm kind of excited to get personalized. And so, okay, so we're running up against our time limit. I have one last question for you. If I was working in a retailer, if I was assistant manager, if I was a guy in the dock, doesn't matter. If I was wanting to get into this space, if I was wanting to get into the business of AI, the business of sure that they need. What kind of career path do you think would help me?
If you're are you in the marketing or you're in some type of brick and mortar retail
management? Let's say I'm a marketing person wanting to make sure that I'm not left behind where all this AI takes.
Yeah. Well, one thing I did personally, there was a course at MIT. It was a 6-week remote course that I took on AI, not for data scientist nerds, and algorithms and that kind of thing, but how to understand it, how to take a business problem and turn it into a problem that might be solved by AI. And I found that extremely useful. And I know MIT is not the only place. There's 6 or 7 good outlets for training. So kind of a foundational knowledge of language, where it's at, how to find others in your space that are interested, kind of create a peer group of people that might be interested in the same areas that you are. That's part of it. But then I think it comes down to, as I said earlier, finding real problems that you in your everyday job are interested in solving and kind of probing to see, is there a practical way that I could use AI? And then without compromising my company's IP, I might get a ChatGPT seat for $20 a month. And I just start playing with prompting. A lot of this is about, even in our product, it's about generating a prompt of what you want the AI to do. But then it's about tweaking the prompt. It gives you something back and you're like, yeah, but that doesn't really kind of feel right. Put this word or add that word, or you just keep going with it. And then when you get a prompt you like, saving it and building a library of prompts and kind of building on your knowledge so that every day when you come back to it, you're not starting from scratch again, because you've got this library of ways that you've learned that you and whatever AI tool you're using, how you get along together. And when you reach success and when you get failure, it's sort of building your knowledge with simple problems and then coupling them together like you do in any kind of training to get to something more complex.
That makes sense. I love that, because you basically go out and MIT, University of Texas, places like that are all offering these right now, and it's kind of just to get the vocabulary down, at least. And you're if you're in marketing, you're in this world between right brain and left brain. Your buyer is typically thinking brand and kind of right brain, emotive things. But, AI is kind of left brain and scientific-y and mathy, and you're sort of the translator of this technical technology into a marketing function. And that's what marketers do, right? They're sort of translating between two worlds. And that's where I found the language extremely helpful, because you'll get people throw out all these data scientist terms. You can kind of get lost in them and lose the meaning you're trying to do. I think that's perfect advice. And we're reaching our time limit, but I appreciate you, Stephen. I cannot thank you enough for joining us here. And this has been really interesting. I look forward to getting personalized messages from you.
All right.
So,
no worries.
All right. Thanks again, sir.
Okay.
If you would like to be featured on our podcast, please email us at podcast@retailcorner.live or visit our website, retailcorner.live. Looking forward to having you as our guest on our podcast, and thank you so much for listening.